everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Murph Show. This is a historic day because John Doyle is here, and he is the first guest to come on The Murph Show 2 times in the very long history of the show. So thank you, John.
You're welcome, Joe.
Yeah. So the very sexy, the very talented, the very funny, amazing voice, John Doyle, amazing hat, personality.
I thank you for finally appreciating me for my true attributes.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, John. The first time you were here, we talked a lot. You were here in person, and we talked a lot about how you thought that voiceover actors could bring comedy into what they do on a daily basis. This time, I thought it'd be cool, at least for myself. I just want to deep dive into your comedy, how you make your content, how you write, how you perform, what inspires you, how you got started. So I just want to all comedy. If voiceover comes up, that's great too, but I'm just really interested in your comedy. So how did you, what was your first experience with comedy where you said, I could do this as a job?
I did a show. It was kind of an open mic type of thing. And I had to do, I think, 10 minutes. And I, for some reason, wanted to try it. It was one of those things, you know, people want to go skydiving or want to go boogie boarding or, you know, want to be in an erotic film or something like that. You know, that normal people have. And I remember thinking one time when I was watching a guy on television doing comedy, you know, just like when you see erotic films or when you see skydiving in movies, you think, I could do that. I think that all the time. I could be that plumber, you know, making the house call, and you know, that I could be that comedian. And I think that the first thing you have to have is this feeling that you could actually be one of those people. Like you could, the first thing you need to have is an ability to see yourself in that position, to visualize yourself actually doing that. So when I saw a guy doing comedy on TV in Germany, I thought, oh, I could do that. And I'd like to try that. So then I looked into the possibilities of actually doing that, where it would be possible to perform and how much I'd have to do and all that sort of stuff. So it began with this notion of, hey, that's pretty cool. You know, just like with, I think, most other things that people get into.
Yeah. So I know I have seen from some comedians that the way they got started is just by doing a whole bunch of open mics. And I don't know if Germany has the same culture of open mics that we do here in the United States, but was that your first step, just going out there and doing open mics?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like in the United States. I mean, but it was beginning to be like that in the United States. There were just shows that they didn't necessarily call them open mics. But essentially that's what they were, and they gave newcomers an opportunity to do something on stage, to either sing or to tell jokes or to read poetry or play music or something like that. So I guess it was kind of the beginning of open mics in Germany. And the good thing about it was that you didn't need that much material. You only needed 5 minutes or 6 minutes or something like that. So everyone could kind of, who wanted to try it at least, could somehow create that amount of material. So that's how I started. Yeah. Like with most other people, it went reasonably well, or at least for most of the people who continued, it went reasonably well. And I thought, oh, okay, I kind of survived that. And let me see if I can be better the next time around. It was kind of a challenge that I gave myself.
Yeah. And it's definitely, I think, I don't know how true this is, but people say the biggest fear in life, even more than the fear of death, is the fear of public speaking. So stand-up comedy is all about public speaking. It's just you and you're talking to an audience.
Yeah, I don't understand how that's a bigger fear. I mean, I fear death more than I fear comedy, because I've been on stage where I bombed before, and I don't think it's as bad as death. You know?
I guess you won't know.
I think death is like as bad as it gets, especially when you're lying in a coffin and people are looking at you and you're thinking, God, he looks so good.
Yeah.
You know?
Of course.
He's never looked so good before, you know? And you're thinking, he's wearing makeup and he's, you know, and he's dead. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But
I agree.
I never really I can understand the stage fright aspect of it and the anxiety. I still have the anxiety when I go up on stage. Before I go up
Yeah.
on stage, 10 or 15 minutes beforehand, I'm really, really nervous.
Yeah.
And I think it's the things that makes me still to this day the most nervous. Um, but I think, yeah, with me at least, the experience has been that nervousness, that fear dissipates quickly. Within about 5 or 6 minutes, I find that I'm just myself on stage,
Yeah.
and then I feel very comfortable with it. So I'm just afraid of the initial leap, and once I get past the initial leap,
Hmm.
it's actually okay, even if
Yeah.
it's not going as well as I had hoped it to go.
Yeah. So in full disclosure, you are my cousin. So
Yeah,
I know you personally, and I know that you, when you're animated, excited, nervous, you talk and you tell cool stories and you tell funny stories. And from
right.
seeing you in Germany perform, to me, it seems like you're the same guy on stage as you are eating dinner afterwards. And I wonder if that's something unique about you, or you think that people are the same on and off stage, or how do you think most people are their true selves on stage, or they have an act?
Um, I think that it's probably a little of both. I mean, I think that there's always a certain aspect of the person that's real, that's on stage. I mean, of course, you're exaggerating certain truths, and you're looking to maybe make certain truths funnier. Um, so not everything that you're saying is identical to what you've actually experienced in your life.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of fiction, in stand-up comedy. I remember once hearing an English comedian talk about what comedians do, and he said, "We tell plausible lies." So, to a certain extent, you have to be believable. And if you're not believable, it doesn't matter what you're saying. That with most stand-up comedians, at least, whether it's Louis C.K. or Bill Burr or Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle, I think a lot of what you see on stage is the way they actually are. I think it's the way they actually are.
Yeah.
But when they talk about their act, it's the actual script of the material that over time developed um, and coalesced into a tight set. And that was something that took time.
Hmm.
That ease that they exhibit when they're doing their 60-minute special or something like that wasn't what they had when they started creating it maybe a year or 2 years earlier,
Yeah.
right? The finished product. That confidence and that it's easy for me to be confident on stage when I know all of my material works.
Right.
It's harder to be confident when I'm trying new things out and I
Hmm.
just don't know how to what extent it'll resonate with the audience. So I think for the most part, my experience has been the way stand-uppers at least are on stage is to a large extent the way they are off stage.
Okay. But it has
Yeah.
to come from some truth in their life, right? It can't just be a totally made up story.
No, it has to come from some truth in your life. I mean, Chris Rock talked about it as being truth and pain.
Yeah.
Combined. There has to be a certain amount of truth, and there has to be a certain amount of pain, meaning it
Mhm.
really affected you in some way, and for it to be believable. So yeah,
Yeah.
there has to be a certain amount of truth, but it doesn't have to be entirely true because
Yeah.
the goal is to make people laugh.
Hmm.
Your goal is to give an audience a really good show and for them to think, oh man, that really felt good, really,
Yeah.
crack it up for an hour.
Yeah. And what something I always wonder is, um, I don't know, a lot of comedians use their struggles in their own lives and their struggles with their family and make that into a joke. And they get up on stage and people laugh at it, and people love it because it's funny. Everyone can relate to it. But I always wonder if that off stage, do you does it make it harder for you to kind of experience those difficulties and have everyone laugh at it, or is it just a positive way to get through a struggle or a pain in your life?
I think it's a positive way to get through it. I mean, I think your job is to take experiences that people can relate to and to find humor in them
Hmm.
and to communicate that experience so that the audience also finds the humor in what you're saying and
Yeah.
that the audience laughs. And you don't want the audience to find the humor on a cerebral level where they have to think about it and consider it and and then laugh 5 minutes later.
Right.
Want the audience to get it on a very visceral level, to
Hmm.
basically laugh at the joke before they decide on whether or not they want to laugh at the joke.
Yeah.
Um, the reaction to be immediate,
Right.
but I think that, like I said, I mean, when comedians talk about their act, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're becoming a different person or they're being phony. It
Hmm.
just means that, when they're doing a 20-minute set or they're doing a 30-minute set, they're focusing on their material that works, and they're being basically booked to deliver that material that works. Especially if you're being booked on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, and a lot of people are in the theater, they're not booking you to try out new material about whatever the subject is. They're
Yeah.
booking you to basically come out with your Mike Tyson material and to basically go out there and kill him.
Yeah. And so, how did you go from those 5 minute kind of test shows where you were just testing things out for 5 minutes to get your feet wet in comedy? How did you go from that to longer stand-ups and kind of moving towards doing this as a career? How did that transition start?
Well, if you want to do it as a career, you need more material, because if you only have limited material, then the gigs that you're going to get are small gigs,
Hmm.
and the smaller gigs aren't going to pay so well. And if they don't pay so well, you're not going to really be able to make a living out of it
Right.
once you deduct your travel costs and once you deduct the taxes and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of mandatory that you kind of increase the amount of material that you have, and you increase it by basically thinking about what it is that you like talking about. If you have, say, if you start out and you have 10 minutes and your specialty area is being a foreigner in Germany, or being a parent, or being newly married, then what you're basically doing, I think, is thinking about other aspects of that subject that you haven't explored yet,
Yeah.
And the cool thing about stand-up is that most people take things out of their lives. So if they're saying something like, well, we're thinking about having kids, they're taking a lot of the truth from that experience and putting it into their comedy, and so they're looking for the funny aspects of that thing,
Hmm.
and then they'll, brainstorm with themselves about, the positive sides about having kids and the negative sides about having kids, and the highs and the lows, and basically you're just expanding your material until you have enough material to be booked for a bigger gig, which pays better.
Yeah.
And in Germany, what Germans want when you're booked as a solo artist, they want you to have a full night show.
Hmm.
And the full night show in Germany is 90 minutes. So
Yeah.
you have to have two 45-minute sets with
Yeah.
an intermission in between. And if you don't have 90 minutes with maybe a couple of minutes of, encore afterwards, then you don't really have enough material to be a solo artist. And if you're not a solo artist, it's kind of hard to make a living,
Yeah.
because you're not really making that much money doing a 10-minute set here, 15-minute
Right.
set,
That's so much. Here it tends to be in US. It tends to be 60 minutes, right?
Yeah, in the States, it's less. In the
Yeah.
States, it's usually 60 minutes. You might have a warm-upper come on and do 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So in the States, it's usually the headliner is doing a big headliner is maybe doing an hour, maybe an
Yeah.
hour and 10. In Germany, the tradition is theater, and theater wants, like a movie length or a theater length performance time, and not
Yeah.
60 minutes. So, you've got to gauge it accordingly, and you have to have basically 90 minutes of material that don't bore people.
Right.
And then, you're going through the whole process. You're looking for theaters. You're looking for people to book you. When people book you, you're looking for people to buy tickets. If you don't sell as many tickets as the theater would like, then they don't want to rebook you.
Hmm.
If you sell enough tickets, then they do want to rebook you.
Hmm.
You're constantly competing with other people who are selling tickets. So if you only sell 50 tickets and somebody else sells 200 tickets, regardless of whether or not they like you, they're going to want to book the person who sells 200 tickets.
Right.
So it's a constant competition, and
Yeah.
you have to constantly sort of evolve. It's a hard thing to just sort of say, okay, I'm gonna do this material that I have forever.
Right.
While you have to break in new things.
Yeah. Especially when you start to have a fan base like you have in Germany, and they
Yeah,
already have seen your
Louis
material.
C.K. said before he had his big success, that he was doing the same material that he had for a long time, and then he developed such a successful fan base that the fans were saying, we don't want to hear that material when we
Yeah.
see you next year. We don't want to hear that material when we see you in 2 years. So he had to, he was forced by his success to generate more material faster.
Yeah.
That's one of the, side effects of success. You have to become a harder worker.
Yeah.
It's easier to kind of, sort of live on your past successes with less success.
Right.
But if you want more success, you have to take more risks, and you have to develop new material.
Yeah, and that probably varies, right? Like if you probably certain comedians will write less frequently. Like I know we've talked about Louis C.K. and how he writes a new special every year. But is that true for all comedians, or does it
No, that's
vary?
not true. I mean, Louis C.K. That's
He's just
pretty.
nuts. Yeah.
He, yeah, but he's nuts. But he's also, his stand-up is a bit different when compared to, say, Jerry Seinfeld. I mean,
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld, I think, said at one point that he every year circulates 20% of the oldest material out of his show, and has 20% material come in. So 1/5 is new, and the oldest 1/5 goes out, and it's a constant.
Okay.
He said every 5 years he has a completely new show. I think that's his thing.
Yeah.
Louis doesn't have necessarily the same setup, punchline. He's telling basically the story of his life,
Yeah.
as life is evolving. And so I don't think that, comedians in the past would probably say there are too few jokes in there.
Mhm.
But I think that what fans of Louis love is that they feel like they're getting a window into his life, and they're just they want to see basically what's happened in his life in a funny way in the last 12 months. And I think that it doesn't require the same kind of tightness of set a punchline,
Yeah.
that maybe previous comedians had,
Like
that
Rodney Dangerfield or something.
that Rodney Dangerfield had, or that Bill Cosby had back in the day, or that or that most stand-uppers had, during the day. I think it's harder to have a whole new hour every year.
Yeah.
But I think that the fans like Louis' character, and the character then goes on a rant about kids, about divorce, about getting older, about health issues, and
Yeah.
and the audience I really like his style. I think it's only possible to do an hour new every year by doing it the way he does it.
Like long form stories, kind of.
Yeah, and I mean, Rodney Dangerfield's jokes and things like that. I think it's hard to create that kind of content within that short period of time, you
Yeah,
know. Um,
because he could have like
but
10-second jokes or something.
yeah, he has 10-second jokes, and if he does an hour of material, he needs like 600 or 700 more
Yeah.
jokes. And I don't know. I think it's different, but it's still, you know, with Louis, it's still amazing that he can do an hour special every year. It's
Yeah.
still a great accomplishment. Um, but you know, but he's to the point with his success that he kind of has to do that because he does his tour and his fans see him,
Yeah.
and then when they see him again, they want new material.
Yeah.
They don't want the stuff from the year before.
Yeah. As soon as you have like a Netflix or HBO or some big network special, you can't really use that anymore,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, exactly. So basically, success forces you to be more hardworking,
Hmm.
and less success gives you an option to be lazy.
Hmm.
Uh, and the big challenge is to be hardworking when nobody's forcing you to be hardworking.
Yeah.
It's easiest to just kind of do a little bit each day, as opposed to saying, okay, this is my full-time job and I'm going to think about comedy 8 hours or 10 hours a day. You
Right.
know, that's the harder version, especially when nobody, it's like with you and your career as a voice artist, with nobody pushing you, you have to push yourself.
But from my perspective, from the outside, looking at your career, I would say that your kind of major changing point or breaking point was when you were on Star Search, which is a German, probably like America's Got Talent or something like that, the German equivalent of that. So,
Well, America had back in the day also Star Search.
oh,
I mean,
okay.
Star Search came to
Oh,
pass.
okay.
The guy from Britney Spears was on Star Search when she was little.
Okay.
The guy from King of Queens, who went on to become a film actor,
Yeah.
was on Star Search. Martin Lawrence, in fact, was on
Oh,
Star Search.
okay.
I think Martin Lawrence, like me, didn't win.
Hmm.
I think he came in like second place or something like that. I think that's
Which was the same as you, right? Second.
but no, it was basically, yeah, a big national talent show,
Yeah.
and that really helped.
So you were just saying how when you become more famous or more well known, your material has to change. So did you notice before Star Search you could use similar material, and then as soon as you went through Star Search and more people started recognizing you on the streets of Germany, did you, as soon as that happened, did you start to think, oh crap, I have to make new material now because people know my jokes?
I don't think I thought that at the time
Hmm.
because it was new to me. Um, but that's what was happening. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, the more people who see you, and the more people who like you, the more people who want new stuff,
Hmm.
and the more people who say, "Oh, I know that joke," or "I know that joke," or "I know that joke." So it's a plus and a minus at the same time. You know, you get the recognition and you get the accolades, but you also get the expectation that there's going to be something completely new that follows that. So
Yeah.
you pressure basically to come out with a new hit, you know, to come out with a new product
Yeah.
that's just as entertaining or just as, you know, funny as what it was that got you on the map in the first
Right.
place.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it has its plus sides and its minus sides. But, you know, basically everybody wants to get seen. Everybody wants to get exposure. Without the exposure, you're not going to have any success.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's probably really tough. It's um, everyone's going to always compare your new work to your old work that they love. So I guess, do you think to yourself as you're writing new material, this has to be better, or are you comparing it in your own head?
No, I think that people, especially when it comes to stand up and things like that, I think that people forget. And I think that I think that basically if you can keep people laughing, the point is you got to keep people laughing. You have to continue to be funny and believable. And if you continue to be that, they're going to be people, you're going to have fans and you're going to have people coming to your show. But you just have to continue to be funny and be relevant for an audience, meaning you can't like rest on your laurels. You have to continue to push it. So I don't think necessarily that there are that many people out there saying, oh, compared to 5 years ago, it's not as funny.
Right.
I mean, I think there's maybe a little of that, but I think, you know, basically the thing that you've got to do is basically constantly come up with stuff that's relevant to your life right now, you know?
Yeah.
And stuff that was relevant to my life when I was in Star Search isn't relevant to my life now.
Yeah.
15 years or 12 years later. So I think you have to constantly be keeping it real. And you have to say, okay, what's in my life right now? What's bothering me right now? What's challenging me right now? What's scaring me right now? What do I find stupid right now? And then try and develop material that reflects that. So it's a constant process. You can't, you know, I guess if you made a ton of money, you could say after some point, I don't feel like doing anything new and that's it, I'm retiring, you know. But most comedians kind of have to keep working to pay the bills. So to keep working, you have to keep coming up with newer stuff.
So when you're coming up with new material, what's your writing process like? Do you sit down and think, okay, I need to write new stuff, or do you kind of just let your life experiences happen and then write it down as you live your life?
It's a little of both, but I think what works for me better is trying to live my life and to not kind of fake it, and you know, to basically put myself in situations that I would put myself in anyway, and at the same time have a little bit of distance from myself, or a little bit of perspective, you know, being able to see the situation from outside of myself and then to observe what's going on. So for example, if I go into a shop to buy my wife sexy lingerie or something like that, I would be aware of the fact that I'm a little bit nervous going into the shop.
Right.
And I'm a little bit nervous having a conversation with this attractive saleswoman about what my wife would probably like, which in reality something that I would like and she would probably completely dislike.
Right.
So you have to kind of, when you're in that situation, you have to kind of monitor your own truth. And if your own truth is, oh, this is making me a little bit nervous, this is making me a little bit insecure, you know, this is lowering my confidence, then you have to reflect on why that's the case afterwards and sit down and try and come up with truths about that experience. And sort of say, you know, it was weird when did you ever notice when you go into a place and you want to buy your wife sexy underwear, you know, you kind of feel like a pervert, you know, or something like that, you know. And that's part of it. That's part of it. And the other part of it is, for me at least, for me, it works much better when I'm actually talking out the experience with another person, like with my wife. You know, I talk with her about my comedy material that I'm developing. For me, that's much more effective than sitting down by myself and writing it down.
Because you get instant feedback, kind of.
I need to get feedback. And usually if she laughs at something, there's something funny there. And then, you know, I write it down. So my process is kind of keeping the antenna up to see what's happening, reflecting on it, and then sharing the experience verbally. And then when there's a verbal response in the form of her laughing or saying, hey, that's funny, you know, keep going, you know, there, keep going there, then at that point, I write it down. And at that point, I memorize it, and then at that point, I work it into my live show.
Once you get a verbal a response from your wife or whoever you're talking it out to, then you kind of memorize it and then you test it out. How soon after you get the idea and talk it out with someone, how soon after that happens are you on stage trying it out?
Well, as soon as possible. You know, if it's a section about being married, I just, try and link it into that section. So it becomes a part of the section. It becomes a part of that material. So if it doesn't work, it's only, 30 seconds or something like that, or it's only 1 minute. But it's not a subject that I have to introduce and then bail out of. I just sort of inject it into a section that's already alive and working, and then see what happens. And if it works, I just keep it, and that then grows that section. That section relationship, that section married, that section kids, that section getting older, that section going to the doctor, that section politics, that section stress, and that sort of thing. And then it just sort of expands that section.
So do you think that comedians have kind of a main topic that they talk about? I guess Jim Gaffigan is a good example of, he really talks about his family and his eating habits and just eating a ton of food. Louis C.K. talks about really crazy experiences that he's had and how he sees things in a very different way than most people. Do you have a lens that you kind of look through for your comedy? Do you have a main topic that you always are coming back to?
Well, the reality is, if you're an American and you're living in Germany and you're speaking German and you have a bit of an accent and you maybe here and there make mistakes that Germans wouldn't make, or the reality is that you're always going to be, to a certain extent, the American who's living in Germany. So you're always going to be the foreigner experiencing the new country or the different country. So there's always an aspect of that, because I didn't come to Germany as a child. I came as an adult. And so I learned German as an adult. And I had a whole life prior to being in Germany. So that's always a part of it. Because for the audience, that's something that distinguishes me from other comedians. If I were to sort of stop talking about that, I would, I think, be harming myself, because that is a big part of who I am. When people hear my acting, they're kind of like, oh, why? What's up with that? Why do you sound a little different?
Right.
That happened. So I have to kind of, backtrack and say, hey, I came to Germany in my 20s, and that sort of thing. So that's, I think, always going to be a significant part of my show. But what's also in my show is normal everyday stuff, that I go through, health issues. Now I'm technically 15 years away from retirement, retirement age. 15 years now doesn't feel like that long a time. And so I'm like getting my mind around that idea, that 15 years or in 14 years, I'm 67, So, that's scary and that's a bit weird, but that's also something that you can talk about, because it is kind of scary and a bit weird, or at least it is to me. So that gives me something to talk about. I think whatever it is you do, it just has to be relevant to you. Anything can be relevant. If you say, hey, that's ridiculous, I don't care, age plays no role, age is, what you make of it, well, then it's not relevant to you, and then you do other material,
Right.
But, but I think, Rodney Dangerfield had this lens of, I don't get respect, and he always was looking things through the lens of, I'm not respecting me. They're not
Hmm.
respecting me. My wife's not respecting me. My family, my kids. My wife's so fat. She's not respecting me. And all that sort of stuff. And that was his lens. That was his stuff.
Yeah.
But I think mine is to a certain extent. My lens is to a certain extent. A guy who's experiencing Germany,
Hmm.
kind of sort of I hope, fresh take on living in Germany,
Yeah.
from a guy who's always lived in Germany. So, hey, I experienced this, I discovered this, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
My lens is kind of the guy who's kind of like, the assimilated, uh, the assimilated klutz, the person who on the one hand is assimilated and speaks German, but who on the other hand still is slipping on the banana peel, of life in Germany,
Yeah.
and sort of that sort of thing, and that gives me a lot of material,
Yeah.
not only being the foreigner, but being the assimilated foreigner, and being the confused assimilated foreigner, and and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's what's so attractive about you is in terms of your comedy is that you are this guy who grew up in Jersey and now is a comedian in Germany. It's not a normal story. That's what's so cool about it. So probably your audience wants to see that, but at the same time, you've lived in Germany for decades and you have a German wife and a German son and you're totally a German citizen. Um, but do you find that you kind of have to force yourself to see things from an American's point of view and tell that to your audience? Does your German audience find that interesting, how you see things from an American perspective?
Um, I don't. I mean, I think that as far as Germany is concerned, and I don't know if other countries are to this extent like this, France or Spain or Italy or other countries. But I think that as far as a lot of Germans are concerned, you can never truly become German. Like
Right.
the idea that Americans have, I think most of the world doesn't have. Like if we move to Tokyo, and if you move tomorrow to South Korea, the way you lived in South Korea, and said, okay, this is going to be our home. We're going to get South Korean citizenship. We're going to learn Korean. I think a large portion of society would probably, regardless of how good your Korean was,
Hmm.
still say that's the American guy.
Yeah, we'd
You
still be
know,
outsiders.
you'd still be in their mind not Korean. You can't, in that respect, become Korean. And I think Germans are kind of the same way. I think you
Yeah.
can get a German passport, you could become a German citizen, but a lot of people also don't see that as becoming German. They
Hmm.
wouldn't necessarily say, I'm now German, you know, um, because German in a lot of people's minds is not something you become. It's something that you either are, you were born German, or you're not born German. You
Okay.
don't really become it because you can't be reborn German. It's not like
Yeah.
religion where you say, I'm born again German, something like that. Um, but but I think that people are interested in this challenge of what it's like um, being in my situation, but at the same time they're also interested in me relating to them as a person who just lives in Germany, just the way they live in Germany. I
Right.
can't entirely be the stranger because
Yeah.
when you look at stand-up comedy, people basically want to sit in the audience and say, yeah, I think that too. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think that too. Yeah, oh man, it's exactly what I think about relationships. That's what I think about Trump. That's what I think
Hmm.
about Obama. That's what I think about, you can only go so far with being the outsider. If you want to have more success, insider, because fans want to follow people and to buy tickets for people who they say are like them. People don't go see Chris Rock because they say, "Oh, I'm interested in hearing about the African American experience in America, and he's going to give me a funny take on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be a certain percentage of people who are like that, but the large percentage of people want to relate to what he's saying, and if they can really relate to what he's saying, he's going to have a big fan base,
Yeah.
And he can only do that by casting himself as one of us. But like when you see with certain comedians, I mean, Chris Rock and Martin Lawrence and these guys, before they became really, really, really big, their audience was pretty homogeneous.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Lawrence's audience was African American, and Chris Rock's audience was pretty African American. And then he became more successful, and then you got more urban Caucasians and and millennials who didn't care whether you were
Mm-hmm.
what ethnicity or race you were or something like that. But for the most part, your initial fan base is from people who really can identify with you on a very deep level,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, Dave Chappelle talks a lot about white, black, talks about, race in his comedy.
Right.
It's harder, I think, to talk about race as the majority group than it is as the minority group. It's harder if a white comedian would talk about race. I think it wouldn't be as sympathetic or although that's not true. I mean,
Well, it just has
Bill
to be
Burr
truthful.
talks about race.
Right.
Yeah, Louis talks about race. That's
But
not
they
true
don't
that
talk
they don't.
about the black experience in America. That has to be from a place
They
that's
can't
true.
talk about the experiences having experienced it themselves because they didn't. But they also talk about race. That's true.
Right.
I just think that it has to be true, and it has to resonate with you, and it has to be something that's important to you for you to actually, go up on stage and talk about it. And, because it's comedy, it should be something that makes people laugh, and because if the people aren't laughing, you're not going to really be in business,
Right.
you're not going to get booked. That's the key. The key is for the audience to think, wow, that guy was really funny, or that woman was really funny. That's the main thing that you want to get.
Yeah. So how do you think, from your perspective, the German audiences relate or compare to the American audiences? Is there major differences that stand out in your mind to what audiences want to hear from a comedian?
I don't think there are any real big differences. I think German audiences don't heckle as much as American audiences. I think German audiences are more kind of theater-based and less bar-based,
Right.
So I think German audiences have more of an attention span. I think you can tell a longer story without getting to the punchline than you can in a comedy club in America. I think in a comedy club in America, you have to get to your joke pretty fast. I think it's kind of an attention span thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's much more of an appreciation in America for talking about sex or using profanity than there is in Germany. German audiences are much faster to say, oh, that was crude, or that was unsophisticated, that was below the belt, that was mean-spirited or something like that. So I think German audiences, when it comes to comedy, have more taboos,
Mm-hmm.
have more areas where they say, we don't do that, we don't do that, we don't do that.
So certain topics are off limits for a German audience?
Yeah, I think German audiences are more, or German comedians are more politically correct than American comedians are.
Mm-hmm.
I think, somebody like Bill Burr would probably have problems in Germany because people would, because
so
he's
true.
not as they'd like him to be.
Yeah.
Or the same with Louis. The same with, I think, almost all successful comedians in the US, really big comedians. I think that, you'd find a substantial portion of Germany that's offended by certain portrayals,
Hmm.
that in America people would say, all right, that's comedy. If you don't like it, well, you don't have to watch it. But, in Germany, um, I think there'd be more resistance um, to those types of comedians performing. Yeah.
Yeah. Is
But
there
I
any?
think, like I said, basically the audience is a reflection of the culture, right? And if the
Yeah.
culture is different, and if the culture has different priorities, then you have to meet those priorities of the culture, or the culture is going to reject what it is you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Comedy clubs in the States, the culture wants a certain behavior, and if it gets it, it's happy, and if it doesn't get it, it's not happy. But you know, yeah, it's a little bit more of a theater culture in Germany,
Hmm.
and it's a little bit more of a of a bar culture, in the United States,
Yeah.
kind of urban, hipster bar culture, in the United
Yeah.
States. In Germany, more theater, and you listen, and that sort of stuff. I would say probably in general less funny, less, oh, I'm tearing with laughter, funny,
Mm.
and oftentimes very clever, but not
Mhm.
necessarily very funny. You know.
Right. Yeah. Because I
Again, but
guess.
that's also from an American
Yeah.
perspective. A German would say, "Hey, I find it funny because it is clever, and
Uh-huh.
I think about it, and I laughed an hour later, when I really thought about it, and it was really funny, and that sort of stuff." So, it's hard to say. Um,
Yeah, you've told me stories about audience members that have come up to you, or maybe you can tell it better than I can, but people who, while you're performing, will have a stone face, and then afterwards will tell you that was an incredible show. I was.
Yeah, I've had that many times where people said, where people were stone cold looking at me, and then they come up to me after the show and they'd say, "I've never laughed so much," you know, and I'd say, "Yeah, well, the next time, tell it to your face."
Right.
The feeling that I got was that you just didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of feeling uncomfortable because you were like the only face in the audience in the first row I could see, and the feedback that you were giving me wasn't the best feedback. So I think that sometimes with German audiences, people are listening, they're concentrating, and sometimes they're not necessarily laughing doesn't mean that they don't like it. I
Yeah.
oftentimes, as an American, understand it to mean that they don't like it,
Uh-huh.
but that's not necessarily always. It's often the case. Usually, if people aren't laughing, it doesn't necessarily mean they love it. I wouldn't say that either. But there are the occasional cases where people laugh internally and then go home, and then they're cracking up on the way home.
So,
But I think that's still a minority.
I guess American audiences are more interactive, and German audiences might be a little quieter, but they still
Yeah,
enjoy it.
I think American audiences want to have a good time.
Yeah.
American audiences kind of like make me laugh, and they want to have a good time. And I think German audiences, I mean, this is kind of stereotyping a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think German audiences want to have an interesting time. They want to have maybe learn something.
Hmm.
They want to be like a TED talk. You know, and if it's like a TED talk and there are a couple of funny comments peppered in there, but they learn something, then for German audiences that's oftentimes good enough. In America or in England, it wouldn't be good enough. In
Yeah.
America or England, they'd say, you weren't funny enough, and that was it. And that was it.
So are you,
And when they want a lot of jokes. When they see Amy Schumer, or they see what's her name, the woman who has a talk show during the day.
Chelsea
Uh,
something? Oh, Ellen?
no, yeah, Ellen DeGeneres.
Hmm.
They want a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
They want a lot of you know they want a lot of material, and I think Germany's going in that direction. I think Germany also wants more of the American style.
Yeah.
It wants more of the rock and roll. It's kind of transitioning from from jazz to rock and roll, and it's kind of a process,
Yeah.
and we're still in the process.
So do you think that, have you been able to make Germans, I don't know, understand and laugh at the way that the differences of how they view comedy than how Americans view comedy? Is that something that can be funny to them from your perspective, or it just doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I'm tooting my horn, but I've basically changed the German culture. And it's been, kind of an incremental thing. It's been part of my mission here in Germany to,
You're basically a missionary.
yeah, I'm kind of a comedy sleeper, and I'm slowly but surely, making Germany more and more American. You know,
I'm glad you didn't say that another way.
you know, I'm slowly but surely making Germany great again. No, I think, you can only do what you can do. And what I do is what I like doing it. And the way I do it is the way I like doing it. And, the consequences are something that, the audience has to decide. I mean, ultimately the audience buys a ticket, doesn't buy a ticket, likes you, doesn't like you. That's a decision that they have to make. I have to be true to myself, and they have to be true to themselves. And if we meet in the middle, I get to drive a Porsche. If we don't meet in the middle, I ride on the bus. If we don't meet at all, I may be walking.
Keep going.
If it's really a bad experience, I may be walking and maybe beaten up along the way.
Yeah.
Right. But I have health coverage. So I just I go to the doctor and but you just have to be true to yourself, and you have to always do a kind of reality check, and like sometimes, like I'm in the process now where I'm doing new material because I'm just sick of the old material.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I need new stuff because it's not really in my life the way I want the comedy to be. So, then you got to start digging and saying, okay, what do I want to talk about? What's bothering me? And that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So comedy is a constant opportunity to turn your life experiences into art, into something that gives people some pleasure. And so that's kind of a cool thing, but you have to constantly be at it, constantly. But I mean, I think that I would, in that respect, be at it anyway, even if I wasn't doing it. I think it's kind of my personality. It's my way of the world. If I wasn't a comedian, I'd still, go to the lingerie store and feel awkward, and then talk to Martina about it, and then she would laugh.
Yeah.
And then I'd talk to, you about it, or, people and maybe they would laugh. And I would get a kick out of you guys laughing and telling the story. And then I would expand upon the story by maybe, telling plausible, lies, fake comedy, basically, and because basically, I get sort of excited by, a positive reaction, I mean, it's and so I think that I would be doing this anyway. I think
you just happen to be on a stage.
Yeah, if you do it professionally, the only difference is you have to go about it in a professional way, and you have to sort of say, okay, this is my process, and I'm going to actually work at my process, and I'm going to actually put in the time. Because like I said at the beginning of our interview, the easiest thing to be as a freelancer is lazy, to kind of sort of sit back and just say, my old jokes work. I'll just do the old jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the best compliments I ever heard somebody talking about Rafa Nadal, the tennis player, came from Jimmy Connors. And Jimmy Connors, after his career as a tennis player, became a coach for a little while. And he coached Andy Roddick before Andy Roddick retired. And Jimmy Connors was watching Rafa play a match a couple years ago, and this is after Rafa's won the French Open, I don't know, 8 times, 9
Yeah.
times, has made, I don't know how much money playing tennis, over 100 million euros, playing tennis and all this sort of stuff. And Jimmy Connors was asked, how would you describe Rafa and the way Rafa plays? And Jimmy Connors said, Rafa plays tennis like he's broke.
Yeah, he's hungry.
And what he meant was, like, he's playing to earn his meal tonight. He's playing to pay his rent. Like, he's playing tennis with the ferocity and with the determination of a guy who is hungry and who needs the success to go forward, right? Yeah. A guy with $100 million in the bank, I think if I had $100 million in the bank, I don't know if I would be playing like I'm broke. Right. I'd probably be playing like, oh, screw this. My back hurts, my knees hurt, my feet hurt. I'm going to do something else, But if Rafa is playing like he's broke, that's a hard thing to compete against, because that's a fire that he's bringing to each match, you know. And I think that's kind of the best comedians are the comedians who don't look at their bank account. I think, guys like Chris Rock or Louis or
Kevin Hart or something.
Kevin Hart, Jerry Seinfeld, they don't have to do it anymore. Who's the guy who used to do the Tonight Show? Jay Leno. He doesn't have to do it anymore, but he does it because he likes it, and he does it because it gives him pleasure, and he does it because he wants to do it. But it's because he wants to actually do that thing and not say, oh, I've made all this money, And I think, guys like Seinfeld and others would probably do something similar even if they weren't doing it. So in a sense, it's kind of like, I think anything having to do with the arts, if you're a person who's only doing it for the money, you're probably not going to be doing it for so long,
right?
Because for a long time, there's very little money, and if it's all about the money, at some point you're probably going to say, I'd rather do something else.
Yeah, it's too hard if you're just doing it for the money.
It's too hard if you're just doing it for the money, because oftentimes there's no money. Right. And even when there is money, if you're just doing it for the money, after a while you have enough money, and you're kind of like, okay, I got 2 Porsches in the driveway, and I've got a big house, and I, if it's just the money, well, then, what do you need it for, really? And I think the best people in the arts are people who would do it anyway. They do it broke, and they do it with a lot of money because they just like doing it. They like going up on stage, and they like interacting with people, and they like the buzz, and they like that whole, thing. And I like it as well. And when it goes really well, I have a great sense of accomplishment. And when I create new material that works, I have an even greater sense of accomplishment, because then I feel like I'm being good and not lazy at the same time.
Yeah. So John, before we go, what are you working on right now that you're excited about? What projects, is stand up or voiceover, whatever it is?
I'm doing a couple of things right now. I'm on this TV show that's going to be airing, I think, shortly. It's a 4-part documentary on being a foreigner in Germany, and that's airing, I hope, in the next month or two. Yeah. It was stuff that we did back in December, so that's actually done. So I'm looking forward to that actually getting on TV, and we haven't found a time slot yet, but 4 30-minute shows. Cool. Basically about being a foreigner in Germany. What I'm also working on is new material. I have to have a new solo stand-up show in about a year and a half. So I'm in the process of thinking about, okay, what do I want to talk about, and what's relevant for me right now. So I'm kind of mining those topics to see what's relevant. And when I find stuff, it's really gratifying. When I find stuff, that's what excites me. sometimes it's frustrating because you're thinking then you're not satisfied with what you're coming up with. But when I do find those things, then it is gratifying. I think you have to be realistic and sort of say, okay, if I do an 8-hour day, a certain part of the day is going to be frustrating and it's not going to make me happy.
Yeah.
But I've got to do that to find those nuggets of inspiration in between. So I'm doing that, because I have to have a new solo show, and I want to have a new solo show.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about in the future doing working as a keynote speaker, doing keynote addresses in English and in German.
Oh, cool.
On the subject of using humor to overcome obstacles, to overcome problems.
I love it.
And I'm going to do an English version of it, which I hope to do in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do a German version of it, which I hope to do in Germany, and use that for keynote speaking in the US. So those are kind of my projects right now.
Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to find clips of your comedy or just more information about you, or where to reach out to you?
People can find me at johndoyle.de. DE is for Germany, for Deutschland.
Mm-hmm.
John Doyle on the internet. I'm also on Twitter.
I know you're getting active in Twitter.
I'm getting active in Twitter. Comedy John Doyle, all one word. Or is it John Doyle Comedy? No, I think it's Comedy John Doyle. And Twitter.
I'll put the link, the correct link below.
Okay, thanks.
And what about Snapchat?
Yeah, I'm on Snapchat, but I haven't been doing Snapchat for a while since my cousin took a break. He was my big inspiration.
I'm back on.
Okay, well then I'll get back to Snapchat because you were my inspiration for Snapchat. Now I look forward to your morning chats, your morning snaps, and they disappeared after a while. So
they're back. They're back.
So,
check it out.
I need you to snap to start. This is for poetry slams. This is also for Joe Murphy snapping. And
YouTube, right?
Am I? I'm also doing as one last thought. I'm doing Carnival in Germany. Carnival is a really big thing in Germany, and it goes from November until basically Ash Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So until the beginning of March, and there are Carnival shows that book comedians. And your mom, who visited Germany recently, saw a couple of my performances. Yeah. So now she's seen me, Dad's seen me, you've seen me.
I've seen you.
And I'm trying to expand that. So for next Carnival season, this Carnival season, I had 39 gigs. Yeah. And so I'm trying to increase the number for next year.
It's a lot.
And of the 39 gigs, I'd say 35 of them went really well. 35 went really well, and 4 were just awful.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good percentage.
But that's a pretty good percentage.
Yeah.
35 went really well, where I got, some I got standing ovations, or I did an encore type of thing.
But you never know, John. They're German, so they might have just been loving it on the inside for those 4.
Yeah, they might have been loving it on the inside. So that was pretty good. So I'm doing Carnival as well. And, like I said, the main thing that you have to accept as a freelancer, doing comedy, is that you have to constantly be scrappy and look around and see what opportunities are out there. And you have to go out and find the opportunities. Because you're not like punching a time clock. You're not going into an office and, work until 6 p.m., 7 p.m. or something like that. Sometimes it's a crazy work day. A work day for me might be doing a 25-minute routine, or doing a 30-minute routine, or doing a 90-minute, solo show.
Right.
But, that requires, developing new material, that requires traveling, that requires, doing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so you have to constantly, I think, like the process, and I do, for the most part I do. Yeah. So, so that's
pretty cool. So, and I'm also going to visit you in July. So maybe I could make some type of vlog with me and you walking the streets of Germany, show your comedy process in the flesh.
Let's do it, Joseph.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's
For the millions of people watching this, get ready.
Yeah, I hope that people are inspired
and prepared.
Start learning German, and start learning about real comedy in
Real,
German.
yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for coming back. Episode 2. It's been really great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, John.
Okay, take care, man.
Bye.